So the BRICS bloc is gonna expand, and it's not a matter of if, but a question of when. Now, over the past few weeks, we had a lot of information from mainstream media talking about how BRICS is broken, how the bloc is disunited, and expansion is not possible. And the narrative mainly centered around Brazil and India opposing expansion because they were afraid of China. Now, even today, there are a ton of headlines about how BRICS will always be divided. It's like the powers that be are trying to sow discord between the BRICS members. I take this article from Bloomberg. This club isn't big enough for both India and China. Or this piece saying how Brazil is resisting BRICS expansion, quoting mystery sources. But I have breaking news, and if you're hoping for the BRICS bloc to expand, you'll be pleasantly surprised. The host of the summit, South Africa, has officially announced that BRICS will be moving forward on expansion during the 2023 summit. They have crushed all rumors of disunity. According to their ambassador, BRICS has been a catalyst for tectonic change you will see in a global geopolitical architecture starting with the summit. So something big is brewing. The bloc could be announcing the immediate addition of new BRICS members, and if this happens, it will be an immediate game changer that will shock the West. America will be sweating bullets. In fact, India has come out to say that they are not opposed to the expansion of BRICS. They slammed the reports of opposition from the mainstream media as baseless, and now Modi has confirmed he is personally attending the summit in Africa. And this is an important fact because it shows unity and partnership amongst the members. Perhaps BRICS is much stronger than what the West thinks. So the stage is set for a big global shift, and we are going to see the rise of an economic bloc that can truly challenge the G7. In fact, it's going to pose a real threat to the dollar and US hegemony. So why does BRICS want to expand? What advantages does it bring to the bloc? Let's understand what BRICS is all about. It is an economic group consisting of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and they are all about growing their economies and trade. In fact, the BRICS group has already surpassed the G7 in terms of GDP. In 2020, the bloc's economic growth has already exceeded the West, and the trajectory is just astounding. One group is heading up, while the other is slowly crashing down. Now imagine an expanded BRICS. Imagine the group growing to 7 or even 10 members. The economic power will be incredible. And what the BRICS are trying to do is to create a group that has both the supply power and consumption power in the world. And we can see that the biggest consumers in the world are currently the Western economies, the G7. 8 out of 10 economies are from the West, with the United States and the EU right on top of the list. Only China and India stands out, and this means there's a big dependency on the West when it comes to trade. They have the purchasing power, and if they decide not to trade with you, your economy will take a big hit. But if we look at the consumer class in the future, we see a very different story. Apart from China, India, and the US, by 2030, the majority of consumers will come from the emerging markets. G7 countries like Japan, Germany, and France will have a shrinking consumer base, while nations like Indonesia and the Philippines will be the biggest consumers in the world over the next 10 years. And by expanding membership and bringing in countries like Indonesia, BRICS will be able to diversify demand away from the West, so the bloc can effectively trade amongst themselves, and the threat of Western sanctions will be less effective. And if you keep trading only with the West, you'll have to hold dollars or euros, and that opens a big vulnerability when your money could always get sanctioned away just like the Russian reserves. And here's the $1 trillion question. Which countries might be joining BRICS very soon? According to President Lula of Brazil, it could very well be Argentina, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. These nations could be the front runners in the bloc expansion. And here's what Lula said. I consider it extremely important that Saudi Arabia, the UAE, if they wanted, Argentina join the BRICS. And why these 3 countries? Is because they have a lot to give to BRICS in terms of economic power, and in return, they also receive a ton of benefits by being part of the bloc. And let's start off with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They expressed interest to join the bloc late last year and might be the first to join. Saudi Arabia is one of the world's largest oil producers, coming in at 12% of global production. In fact, they are the leader of OPEC+, a group of nations that control over half of the world's oil supply. However, that advantage is also a very big weakness. 74% of their exports center around oil products. That's over $210 billion worth. If the kingdom can't find buyers for their oil, they are in big trouble. In 2021, the biggest buyer of Saudi oil is China. However, if we stack up Japan, South Korea, and the United States, they outstrip Beijing and India when it comes to oil consumption. And that's a very scary thought for MBS. Plus, now you combine it with green energy push from the West, Saudi Arabia knows their days of supplying oil to the West to the G7 are numbered. And that's why they are keen to join the BRICS. What Saudi Arabia fears is an oil price cap imposed on their energy exports. Is the same strategy used against Russia that could cripple the kingdom's economy. Now, back in March, the Saudi minister Prince Abdulaziz gave the US a warning. He told the world that the kingdom will not sell oil to any country that imposes a price cap. And this exposes a big worry that Saudi Arabia truly has. But if they join BRICS, a group whose GDP is growing fast, that fear will be neutralized. According to the EIA, the top 10 oil consumers in the world actually belong to the BRICS nations, especially India and China. And if we count in the Saudis, BRICS represents 30% of global oil consumption. And this is what we call demand power. The bigger the bloc expands, the more self-sufficient it becomes. If they become a target of Western sanctions, Saudi Arabia can still sell their oil to the BRICS and keep the money flowing in. So what does the bloc get in return? The most obvious is energy security. And this can be seen with Saudi Aramco pledging to supply China with energy for the next 50 years and beyond. And just like China, the kingdom could also boost oil investments in the BRICS nations to diversify their supply across the global south. But a big push will be de-dollarization. We've already seen countries like Russia selling their oil outside of the dollar. And during the Davos summit in January, the Saudi finance minister said they are open to selling oil in other currencies. Very soon, oil within the bloc could be settled in yuan, rupees, or even the Saudi riyal. And the end goal is to de-dollarize and de-risk from the West. And how about the UAE? While the country isn't as big of oil producers as Saudi Arabia, they are still a financial powerhouse. And here are some facts to consider. The UAE is still one of the top 10 oil producers in the world, ranking slightly above Iran and Brazil. While the country is more diversified than Saudi Arabia, over 40% of their total exports are still dependent on oil products. And that makes them very vulnerable to any oil sanctions or price caps that could reduce their revenues as well. So if you're the UAE, you want to be part of a bloc that can secure your oil demand for decades to come. The West is going green, they are going renewable, so the future there isn't looking very bright. Now the UAE is much more than just an oil producer. Thanks to the forward planning of their rulers, they established the crown jewel of the Middle East, the city of Dubai. While we know it for its magnificent skyline and the Burj Khalifa, it is also a financial hub in the world. And that is a powerful addition to the BRICS bloc. Having a powerful financial network is just as important as controlling the world's commodities. This is especially true and important in a world of Western sanctions. For example, the UAE today is now a key trading hub for Russian gold. The UAE imported over 75 tons of gold from Russia worth around $4.3 billion. That's over 70 times more than in 2021. And because of Western sanctions on Russian gold, it is now flowing away from London towards Abu Dhabi. As a financial hub, the UAE can provide BRICS with more avenues to transact with the rest of the global economy. And this adds to the list of other financial hubs in the bloc, such as Hong Kong and Shanghai. And it adds more self-sufficiency and allows the members to survive outside of the dollar system. And that is the big fear the West has. If countries are no longer reliant on the Western financial system, then threats of sanctions won't really work. Take this example from India and the UAE. Both countries are now planning to promote the use of local currencies for cross-border transactions. Both countries are going to use the rupee and dirham to trade more with each other, completely bypassing the US dollar. And this is big news because it reveals the roadmap towards bilateral trade within the BRICS bloc itself. Even if there isn't a BRICS currency being created, each member country could simply transact with each other using their own local currencies. So you can kind of understand why the West doesn't want BRICS to expand. The more members they have, the larger the network effect. Now, Argentina is a very interesting country that could join BRICS as well. And from what we know, the country is facing a horrible inflation crisis. Beef prices are soaring and inflation in the country is reaching an incredible 116%. Argentina always had a high inflation rate well above 10%, but since 2022, when the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates, inflation has gone insane, hitting well over 110%. Now, Argentina's interest rate is around 97% today, but it isn't enough. You are still losing over 15% of your purchasing power every single year. And that is a big problem for the people on the street. The cost of living is out of control, and whatever income you bring in can't sustain you for long. And what Argentina faces is a US dollar shortage. The reserve currency is in such short supply that people are now using the yuan to survive. The country is now shifting towards the Chinese currency for their imports. So a big reason for Argentina to join BRICS is to conduct more bilateral trade outside of the US dollar. Argentina currently owes the IMF $44 billion, so there's an urgent need for the greenback. As a BRICS member, Argentina will be able to start trading outside of the dollar in currencies like the Chinese yuan. And in a historic deal, Argentina is now paying the IMF back using the yuan. They'll be paying back 1.7 billion in debt using the Chinese currency instead of dollars. And this underscores the importance of how BRICS can shift the global order away from dollars towards their own currencies. Because if this continues, it becomes much more likely a common currency might be established down the road. But what does Argentina have to offer BRICS? Well, it is the third largest economy in Latin America, just behind Mexico and Brazil. And because of higher commodity prices, Argentina raked in almost $90 billion in exports in 2022. The majority of Argentine exports are agriculture. This includes soybeans, corn, and wheat. And because of the Black Sea grain deal and India's rice export ban, the world is facing a lot of food insecurity. And with Argentina joining BRICS, the bloc will be able to strengthen its food supply. And for Argentina, they also need to find ways to diversify their economy. They cannot be stuck 100% in agriculture. The country recently faced a historic drought, which is affecting their grain production. And because of their falling exports, Argentina's economy contracted by a shocking 4.2% in April. And this pushes them dangerously towards a recession. Argentina needs investments to develop other sectors in their economy beyond agriculture. And by joining BRICS, they can access more money that is friendly towards emerging economies. So by accepting these three countries, BRICS is essentially securing resources and commodities away from the West. They are also laying the foundations for a separate financial system. And we have to pay attention to the BRICS expansion because the world is truly splitting apart. Emerging economies are starting to group together with over 40 countries now seeking membership. And BRICS will be happy to expand the group to build a separate pole in the world order. Now, BRICS expansion has been nothing new. It happened back in 2010 when South Africa was invited to the bloc and everyone benefited from the expansion. Listen to what the South African ambassador to China has to say when it comes to the idea of adding new BRICS members. BRICS was always meant to grow.
The issue of BRICS expansion is not new. As you know, South Africa is the first beneficiary of expansion in 2010. We're very grateful that it was China who proposed this and other BRICS countries accepted us. Then we changed from BRIC to BRICS. So it is important because right from its inception, BRICS was never conceived as an exclusive club. It was pushing a developmental agenda. That's why it's called a partnership. It's not a bloc. So that's what drives us, that we should believe in expediting global trade other than protectionism. Sanctions are not against Russia, are not UN sanctions. But they are having huge impact in my own continent of Africa and elsewhere in the developing world. The food prices, the oil prices, all those got these huge inflationary pressures in our communities. Yet we are not involved in that war. We're far from it. So the putting of these sanctions then have got this ripple effect to all of us. And we have to cushion ourselves against these global destabilizations. We have to have a fairer trading system and paying mechanism, particularly transporter financial flows.
Many countries are afraid of sanctions and their effects, and by joining BRICS, they hope to access a bigger combined economy instead of just relying on the West. So don't be surprised if BRICS expands in the coming years or even in 2023 during the summit. Countries are looking for diversity, and that is what BRICS offers. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will BRICS add new members during the coming summit, and which countries will join the bloc? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.